All right, a contemplative service. I'm not going to preach a sermon. I'm going to offer you a handful of seeds. And you might take one or two or three of them and plant them amidst your own reflections. All right, before we start, I have one person who's saying they can't hear me. What's the consensus in the room? 2 people can't hear me, and everyone else can? Or can't hear me so much that they're just giving me blank looks? Most people can hear me. Okay, look. I'm hearing that's even better. But if we go too high, then it's going to start doing. How are we feeling? All right, let's try it. You can try moving if it's not working for you. Or, if it's starting to really not work, we'll do a wave and we'll switch to the handheld. Okay, we've got options. This room doesn't like me because it's designed for singers who bounce. And I have a quiet speaking voice in the perfect range to not be heard by anyone who's having trouble with hearing. So, that might be you. A handful of seeds. A first seed. It comes at the end of the reading, and we did not hear the word, because the word that we heard in this translation was student, and we more often in the church translate that as disciple. Whoever is a student, whoever is a disciple. So what we are doing when we gather for worship and when we live in the world is being a student. Now, Jessica Hetherington, an eco-theologian in the United Church of Canada, likes to define discipleship this way, as faith lived out in action. Faith lived out in action. The point where what we believe, what we think matters, becomes how we live in the world. Discipleship. Our first seed. A second seed. Each of these little parables that Jesus tells in Matthew's gospel is about the kingdom of heaven. Or as we heard it translated this morning, the kingdom of heaven. And for those of you who were here about 11 years ago, you probably do not remember that I stood right here and said, personally, I don't like the word kingdom that much. Here's why. First of all, it sounds like kingdom, so much that usually you can't tell which one you're saying. And if it's that confusing, maybe it's not useful. Secondly, I think it takes something powerful and keeps the happy bit of it, kinship, relationship, and loses the teeth of kingdom. Because the point of the kingdom of heaven, the point of the word kingdom is they lived in a time where that's what you had. You had kingdoms. You had a whole bunch of kingdoms where a few people had the power, and they made the decisions for everyone else. And the disciples of Jesus said, along with the long Jewish tradition that they were drawing on, there is something greater than all of these powers that are determining how we live. There is a different kingdom And that is where our allegiance is, with God, not with that king, not with that king, not with that king. So in our world, for those of us who don't live in kingdoms, the word doesn't feel relevant. In our world, and this is what I said 11 years ago, it would make more sense to talk about God's representative democracy. But actually, it might make more sense, and this is where I am now, to talk about God's multinational corporation, where the power and the decision-making is, where we put our time and money and allegiance. I don't think we get that from kingdom. I don't think it's awful, but we lose something that is intentionally countercultural about the kingdom, which we also don't have in kingdom very much, given our language. Now, there's one more word that's been emerging more recently in eco-spirituality writing, and that's kinship. And kinship, a real word, is about our relatedness, our interrelatedness with one another and with all living things, all of creation. And so you can take those two ideas together. God's multinational corporation and kinship together when we hear this phrase, kingdom or kingdom, if you can't stand the G. A second seed. So let's talk about the second half of that phrase. Heaven. Because here's what happened in today's world. In today's world, we hear heaven, no S, and think the place we go after we die. Whether or not we believe that's what happens, that's the idea of heaven. So Eugene Park says that rather than reading heaven without the S, we should be reading it with the S, heavens, as in the heavens and the earth, the two parts of the created world from the very beginning. Right? The heavens as the place where God's transcendence, the part of God that's way bigger than us, resides. Heavens, the kingdom of heavens. And so Eugene Park says that phrase, the kingdom of heaven, uses a metonym. A metonym is when you talk about something that's associated with something to describe the whole thing. And if you still don't understand what I'm saying, I'll give you examples. Here's a metonym, the press. A physical thing, the printing press, that becomes a way of talking about the whole thing, journalism as a whole through the press. That's a metonym. Another example, Bay Street, or The Hague, or Broadway, each one a part used to describe the whole thing. So when we're talking about heavens, we're using a metonym, a thing associated with God, to talk about God. Gets at that same idea, something beyond us, something that's different from the way things here work wrong. A third seed. So let's talk about smooth oxeye. Smooth oxeye, or false sunflower, is something that it's a native perennial that we planted in my backyard 3 years ago. And the first year it grew about this tall. And the next year it grew about this tall. And this year, it's not only grown this tall, but it's added extra shooty up bits at the top to keep going. And every year it comes back from the soil and keeps going up with bright yellow flowers. And Jesus says the kingdom of heavens is like a mustard seed. Starts as the smallest of seeds, and it grows to the greatest of shrubs. And here's the thing you need to know about mustard. It's an annual. We got gardeners. It grows from seed every year. The point is not just how big it grows, but that it does that fast. A fourth seed. All right. Let's talk about selling everything you have. Let's not talk about it too long. Do you know anyone who's done that? Who's given up every single thing they have for the sake of their faith? That's scary. How tempting to hold on to a safety net, a contingency plan. How compelling must it be to risk everything for God's vision of what the world should be? Another seed. And then we get to the fish. The fish that gets separated between good fish and bad fish. And it sets it up to talk about fish as people, right? Like good person, bad person. Except that with all of these things, we know that none of us are all good or all bad. So whenever we hear a net full of fish, we think about the question, what would I catch if I cast a net inside myself right now? What fish would be brought up to light? Another seed. So one of the things that I do is go to communities of faith and talk about the question of how do we respond faithfully to a time of climate crisis? How do we draw on the stories of Scripture? How do we draw on the spiritual practices that are a part of our faith tradition? How do we pull on the emotional tools that we develop together in community and we learn from our research into psychology to live faithfully and meaningfully in these times? And we have this image of a head of the household pulling out the old with the new. And I was thinking about the 3 R's, which are reduce, reuse, recycle, and how those have been expanded to include lots more R's. Anyone know more of the R's? Refuse. You start with refusing, don't take it in the first place. I haven't heard regenerate, but I like it. Repurpose. Take something old and give it a new purpose. Refurbish or repair. Take something old, make sure it's possible to use again. Renovate. Yeah, that's like repair and purpose. So using materials that have already been used before. I don't know if there's a specific term for that, but that's great. Right? This idea... Rejuvenate. Repurpose, yes. Take something old, give it a new life. You can look them up. There's multiple lists. They're not all the same. You can get 5 R's, you can get 7 R's. This is what our faith is inviting us into. This as a way of living in the world, as a faithful act, but also this is a way of living into our stories and our traditions. Not saying everything old isn't worthwhile and should be thrown out. Not saying there should never be anything new. But somewhere in between, the old with the new. Another seed. So you have a moment now. If you want to pull out a pen and jot something down to remember for later, you can. Tap it onto your phone, or just sit in silence. If you'd like some more questions to reflect on, there are some in the bulletin. You can use them or not. Give a space for the Spirit of wisdom to speak to you this morning. A little sun, a little rain, a space for something to grow, like a mustard seed.